Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined in person by JP Mason. You're back in the mothership. How's it going, JP?
Surreal to be back. It feels like ages since I've been in here. I can't even remember the last time. It was months ago, wasn't it? I was like,
What's changed?
yeah, I tidied the place up with some framed pictures, and I've still got a music mug, which is controversial in some parts, but hopefully not today. But I know it's good to be back. Just obviously through here with a view to going to Dunfermline later on, the Kingdom of Fife, for a gig tonight, working a show with Teenage Fan Club, which can't wait. And for anyone who getting a bit upset about me mentioning them, I don't know them personally. I've never met them. It's just a guy going to do his job, a job that he loves. So
You're a fan.
I am a fan.
What was the B-Sides album? The B-Sides album that came out kind of in the 1990s, because that's, believe it or not, that was the one that introduced me to the band, because my brother had it. There was a picture in front cover with a guy with a paper bag over his head.
I know the one. I can't remember what it's called, but I know the one you're talking about.
So that was my introduction to Teenage Fan Club, and obviously they're playing in my hometown, Stoke City, this evening in a very small venue.
Yep.
For them, I would say.
I think they just wanted to play a gig, and Dunfermline PJ Malloy's ticked the boxes, so that's what they're playing tonight. Sold out in like a couple of minutes or something like that. So, and I do believe that they are Celtic fans. Actually, somebody was telling me that recently.
Yep. We had. We will get on to last night's game. We had Paul Quinn on a Celtic State of Mind. It was about 2 years ago, and we actually filmed it at Gorbals Sound, which is where they now film Go Radio. And is it across from the Brazen Head? Is that right?
I don't
Just
know,
on the
actually.
corner.
It must be.
It's
That
like an
neck of the
old
woods.
miners' welfare building. And we were in there talking to Paul, who played drums for the Soup Dragons and Teenage Fan Club. Not a bad CV. And he was talking about the fact that 3 members of the Teenage Fan Club had season tickets for the Hampden season.
Impressive.
So
surely Norman was one of them. I heard a story recently that he pointed out a Celtic top in a crowd at a gig, like it was he was like about to start a song, and then he saw somebody wearing a Celtic top, and he called the guy out. I think it was, I don't know if it was in Scotland or it was somewhere like far flung, like the States or something like that, because it must have been strange for him to see, in order to call it out when he was on stage, you know.
A couple of things before we get onto the game then, right? People from the stage calling things out. I remember Ian Brown called out somebody in the crowd at Reading 1996 and told him to remove his Union Jack. Fair play to Ian Brown. The other one was the San Francisco flag that Bono told the guy to get
Oh
down.
yeah, that's the famous one, isn't it? That was getting shared the other day on
Was
Twitter.
it his daughter, the guy's daughter, I
Yeah,
think?
I think it was.
Interesting, eh? Twitter, isn't it? I mean, I was watching the game last night. I wasn't at the game, you were at the game, so we'll be talking about that a fair bit. But I was watching the game on Motherwell TV, and Jock Brown was commentating, and it was a proper throwback.
I heard you say that. I know that there's 2 sides to Jock Brown, as you said last night, but his voice is synonymous with commentary.
I agree.
In the early parts of, in fact, I think I should know this because I've watched it so many times. But was he the commentator in the '88 Scottish Cup final?
I need to rewatch that.
It's either him or Archie McPherson. It was one of the two of them.
Yeah, and I remember.
I think it's Jock Brown. You know, I think '88 it is him.
But see the voices though. That's like you say. There are 2 sides to him, because you remember the Jock Brown era under Fergus McCann at Celtic, but he was one of the voices. He was one of the voices along with Archie McPherson, and dare I say even Jeremy McNee.
Yeah.
And you're in the 80s and you're growing up and you can hear them. And you know what? When I heard it last night, it wasn't instantly obvious to me that it was Jock Brown. But I remember I was thinking, he's a very good commentator, this guy. And then the co-commentator, which turned out to be Darren Jackson, started calling him Jock, and I'm thinking, wow, great idea, I've got to say, because a lot of the club channels aren't as great, I've got to say. I mean, what we had, Ross County, St Mirren, and Aberdeen, Hibs, maybe, and they're not as great. And I think, right, you've wheeled out Jock Brown from the 1990s, and it was a wee throwback. You were at the game, JP. Talk me through it from your perspective, because obviously we're watching it in here. There was quite a lot of chat after the game, some that I agreed with, some that I didn't. And then I'm not going to completely focus the whole show on VAR, but we need to talk about it. And you know what? That's the saddest thing, that we need to talk about it. My tagline today, the strapline: have 6 big VAR decisions and 4 domestic games gone against Celtic. I'm not trying to be a conspiracist here, right? But we'll run through some of the decisions in those 4 games, JP. And I know you'll be honest, even if you think it was the right decision, you'll say that. And we'll run through them at some point. But talk to me about the game last night.
Well, first of all, did you see the Green Brigade letter banner? It was "Our light shines on, Primal Scream." Did you get that? Did you see that?
I just saw the pyros.
Because I saw it come up behind us. It was getting unfurled and everyone was kind of craning their neck because we were right underneath it. And as soon as I saw "shines on," I was like, that's Primal Scream. It's got to be. And then the next thing, all the flares and the fireworks, actual fireworks getting fired out of the stand and everything. So it was pretty, I know, obviously, probably very dangerous, but
it was a spectacle.
It looked cool.
Well,
And
the thing with Primal Scream, obviously, in the last couple of weeks, Bobby Gillespie and Andrew Innes have got together with RMT, and they've recorded that single with Kevin Rowland from Dexys, and also I'm pretty sure the drummer from My Bloody Valentine.
all right, wow.
Or is it the Jesus Mary tune? Could be.
I don't know. I've never seen it.
It's a fair old collab, but let's keep the Primal Scream references in the banners and elsewhere.
That's cool. Well, I mean, the game itself, I had a feeling that it was going to be a bit more difficult than the last time, just because when you've gone and comprehensively beaten a team like we did only a couple of weeks ago, 4-0, and you know, it was a doing that we gave them, really. When I didn't expect it to be, given how they'd played against Rangers the previous weekend. But I think when you've done that to a team and you play them again so soon, they're obviously going to be extra determined to make sure it doesn't happen again. And obviously they're not going to come at us in any kind of gung-ho way, but I think getting the goal early helped, and I thought Matt O'Reilly did really well to win the ball back, to get the ball into Kyogo.
Brilliant.
And yeah, I think at 1-0, you know, we were looking good for our lead anyway, and then the 2-0, that the Jota chance, as soon as that happened, as soon as that ball got played, my pal James next to me was just like, he was off, and I was like, I don't think he was. And then there was obviously all the consternation in the ground, which is now the norm, and there's the delay, and then you get the nod to say that it's been disallowed, and 5 minutes later somebody's like that with the phone going, by the way, never offside, he was onside a mile.
And you see Jota, I think it was Lawrence last night said that the reaction to Jota, but I actually watched it back. Jota's saying, I had my eye on the line.
Yeah.
That's what he's trying to say. That image, JP, right? The VAR image,
From
the
the
so-called
distance,
image,
from the diagonal distance.
from the pylon, at
Somebody put up that it was
New
from
Douglas
the moon.
Park. Is that the image? Is that what they're going on? Surely they're looking at something a wee bit more conclusive than that.
I would hope so. I mean, if that's the angle, how could you possibly make an accurate? For a start, it was dark. It was a dark image. You know, it wasn't bright enough.
It wasn't clear. It was kind of grainy.
Aye, and then you see another angle. And did you notice as well? I watched it was a replay on Twitter or something like that, and you listen to the commentator and he just goes quiet. He doesn't say anything. It's almost like the commentators have been told like not to question it, or not to obviously state, oh, by the way, that's clearly onside. How? Because now you've got a video assisted referee on top of replays, and they're not even given the right decision. That's
absurd.
I mean, and we were talking about this on the way out the ground last night. The only way you can call this out so that you're not seen as some sort of spoiled, entitled Celtic fan who demands to win every game, and if we don't get all the decisions, is when you win a game. You need to call out the decisions when you've won a game. Otherwise, it's going to get to a point where something does cost us in a game, and they'll be like, "Oh, here they are moaning again about VAR," and it's like, well, no, that's 100%. You saw it yourself last night. A completely incorrect decision. He was onside, and yet we got a perfectly good goal ruled out. And what a finish
goal.
as well.
What a goal.
Aye.
I will go through some of the decisions, and we'll have a yea or a nay, and we'll see what everybody on the chat's saying as well. But with regards to that, I just don't think we're calling it VAR. Of course we are. We're saying the VAR decision. The VAR isn't the decision. The decision is a human being who's making the wrong decision. My concern last night was the fact that it looked like a really, really bad angle. And that shouldn't be the case. If they've got half a dozen cameras in a stadium and the TV cameras are showing you a better angle of it. The Motherwell goal, for example, the two lines, it made it pretty clear the boy's on side. That's fine. You take that on the chin, right? By the way,
good finish as well.
It was a great wee finish by the Motherwell player, and you think we probably could have had a moan about the fact that Motherwell didn't deserve to have a free kick in the lead up to it.
I hadn't, obviously, it's kind of halfway down the ground. You can't see it from the stand we were in, but I saw a replay of that today. Somebody put it up on Twitter, and I'm like, what's the foul there?
It's bizarre.
What is the foul? Is it the first phase tackle, or is it the second one? Because neither of them look in any way dangerous, and you can see I think it might be Matt O'Reilly kind of puts his hand in his head and goes, what's that for? And then obviously they score after it. But I mean, there's a lot has to happen after the free kick for the goal to happen. But yeah,
I'll be bringing up the goals. We'll have a closer look at Jota's goal as well, JP. But I also want to talk about Madrid, because you've not had a chance to talk about it, and I don't mean the game per se, but you're there, your experience. I spoke to you when you were over in Spain. Another great away day for you.
It was. It was the one trip that, you know, we all wanted to go on. Everyone. I mean, my entire lifetime we've been waiting for that trip. And my pal Michael, who I went with, you know, he does all the Euro aways, and he has been doing them all. I hadn't been on one since Copenhagen, February 2020. So it was just an amazing, you know, experience to get back. Quite emotional as well to go back and support your team away. You know, when you're used to doing it. I've been used to going away in Europe. Maybe not every single trip, but I certainly try and make a couple of them every time where we're there. And the fact that it was Champions League as well. And yes, okay, it was a dead rubber, but it's the Bernabeu, and yeah, it was amazing. And we just had a really good laugh. Caught up with people that I hadn't seen for ages. My other pal Michael Mulroney, he came and joined us on the first night for a few beers. Bumped into my mate Andy that I used to work at the bank with, just in the street. I hadn't seen him for years, and it was met some new guys that I had never met before from the Leith bus, who were good crack. Thomas and Chippy because he owns a Chippy, and yeah, they were good crack. And it was really good. And we didn't see any trouble. We were on the kind of periphery of that square, the Plaza Mayor, and a couple of guys came down. We ended up sitting outside this random wee pub that was pretty nondescript, but we were just having pints and just having the crack. You know, it was just a group of guys. People just kept joining us, and like tables getting put together, and we ended up with about 4 tables, and people that we didn't even know, Brilliant. Like from other down south supporters clubs down south. I think it was Blackpool and Preston. A bunch of guys came and joined us from there. And they'd travelled all kind of far-flung ways to get to Madrid and everything. You know, it was all kind of planes, trains and automobiles. I mean, we went via Malaga, came home via Geneva, the most expensive airport in the world, by the way. £26 for a sausage, some potatoes and some veg and a can of lager. And the guys next to us had 3 cheeseburgers, a couple of pints and a few soft drinks, and I think they got a kids meal as well, and it came at 150 quid.
Everything is through the roof.
But I mean, you're in Switzerland and you're in an airport. It's going to be expensive, but we were sitting outside that boozer, and a few guys.
What kind of burgers was it? Big Kahuna burgers.
I mean, they weren't even that great, but a few guys came down to that bar that we were sitting in, and they were like, "Oh, you're lucky you're not up there, lads." And we were like, "Why?" And they went, "Because the riot police have just arrived." And those 20 riot police vans just came along and all got out with the shields, and were just going up and, you know, I think, not that it's justified, but I think it was just to sort of spook people into not gathering in large groups and deter people. And it's just like, nobody was doing anything bad, you know, there was no bother or anything like that. It's not as if there was people spoiling for fights or anything. It was just Celtic fans, you know, away from home in Europe.
Doing what they do.
Yeah.
There's 2 things. Well, Stephen Ray comes in. Both Jock and Archie have commentary for the Cup final. One would have been live and the other highlights. One of the Cup finals around about that time, which I still have in the old VHS tapes, as you know, is Jack Charlton's in the studio. He's doing like the halftime analysis.
88.
Is it 88?
Is it? I don't know.
One of the cup fight, 88 or 89, and Big Jack's in the studio doing the analysis. I'll watch it back. I love all that kind of stuff. All that nostalgia. We'll get as much comments up on the screen as possible. Two wee things that came to my mind when you were talking there about your away days, JP, and I don't know how many you've been on, but I remember having
14.
a conversation. 14. There you go. Superb. We were in a hotel foyer, and we were speaking to a guy who will remain nameless because I don't know his name, but he was a guy that basically said, "What you doing here?" And we were like, "We're Celtic fans." I go, "What you doing here? You didn't do the away days." Seriously.
All right.
And we're like, "We're Celtic fans and we're following the club in Europe."
Yeah.
And he had this mentality that unless you'd done like 100, he wasn't interested. And I thought, come on, man, it's not about elitism, especially a trip like that, the cost, the family and childcare and your work and all that kind of stuff has to come into play. And I just thought that's a bit bizarre.
I mean, I've got massive respect for the folk that go to every single European away game because it's a hell of a commitment financially and with your time and everything else. There was Michael sent me a thing yesterday, and it was, I don't know if I'm pretty sure it wasn't true, but it was like Bal football fan goes to AC Milan and returns home 11 years later. That's pretty.
So he was homeless for 11 years or something?
I didn't read the full article.
I think he must have met a mistress over, a Milanese mistress or something.
I mean, an 11-year absence from your home, that's quite bizarre. That's taking it a bit too far, but it's great going away and just, I don't know, it's the camaraderie of being away, and you just end up talking to other people that you wouldn't never see or speak to otherwise. And a guy recognised my voice in a bathroom, and he was like, "You that laddie for the podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like waiting on a tirade of abuse or something like that, and then he was like, no, I listen to it every week. And then we got talking, and he was at the game at Ibrox, the Ibrox disaster, and he came home with his dad, and his dad dropped him off at the house, and then his dad went straight to the pub. And I say the house, it's the same street that I stay in Glasgow, in Maryhill Road. He grew up in the flat next door, and he was telling me all about like the how it was back then and everything. But his dad dropped him off, and he went into the house, and then his mum went, "Where's your dad?" And he was like, "He's away at the pub." And she was like, "I don't believe you. Where is he?" And she was really worried because of what had happened. They had no idea what had happened, because obviously no news, no internet. How would they know? And then she knew, or I don't know if she'd heard it on the radio or something like that, but she knew what had happened, and she went. She said, "I'm going over to the pub. I need to see your dad. I need to see his face, like to see him in person, to know that he's all right." Which is, when you think about it, it's totally traumatic.
And the lack of communication devices that you had back then. I remember quite a bit talking to young Neely Mockin about that, because his old man obviously assisted Jock Stein in getting some of the bodies onto sponsorship boards, getting them into ambulances and all that kind of stuff. And I also spoke to the doctor's son. So the doctor was Dr. Fitzsimmons, and his son, who is Edward Fitzsimmons, told me the story that his dad as well was really affected by that, because he was helping a lot of the people who were needing it, and he only had one, because at that time one ampule, and I'm not sure what it would have been, some kind of adrenaline shot, don't know, and he could only use it, so he took the youngest person he could find, he used it on the youngest person. Thankfully that person survived. So incredible that you're always bumping into folk in your Urinals now, and it's you're that guy for Axel.
No, but we spoke outside for a good bit, and he was just a really nice guy, like mad Celtic fan, been going to games for 40 years, 45.
That's amazing. Big shout out to him.
50 years. Yeah, he was a really nice guy. So things like that. It's just it was good to just get away from here for a bit and just sort of have a bit of time away, catch up with Michael as well. I've not seen him for ages, so we had a good time.
Superb. The other thing that came to my mind, JP, was Jim Orr, who we will know from Friday's bulletin, but also he's a playwright as well, and he was massively involved in Save Our Celts back in the early 90s. And Jim had the foresight to take a camcorder to Seville.
Oh, I heard you talking about this. Yeah.
And we've now got 3 videos,
wow,
which are going to form part of one of our videos this weekend, the archive footage, which is tremendous because he's walking down the street, he's watching Charlie and the Boys, he's at the fountain, he's at all these different places that people always refer to when they talk about Seville. But you see so many fans walking back and forward, and you may be on that video.
I'm not. I got to the ground, and all I saw was the ground, and then I was away again. So I never got any. I would really like to see that from the point of view that I didn't get to see any of it in person. I was there that day, but because the stadium's so far away from the city centre, I didn't get the chance to go in and soak up the atmosphere. I mean, I was lucky to have a ticket for the game and experience the game, which I would take that over anything. You know, I would rather have been in the ground and everything else, because that's what you go to these trips for. I have respect for people that go without tickets, and I went without a ticket to Madrid, but I was confident I would get one for the Madrid end, and flukily managed to get one for the Celtic end, but that's another story. But yeah, nothing to do with this, by the way. Just FYI, anybody going, oh, you got it because you're on that podcast? No, I didn't. It was actually through a 20+ year old friendship with someone. So there you go.
Nice.
Which was pretty cool. So the Seville thing is, I'm really keen to see that, because I've seen pictures and I've seen that interview. Is there not a guy that there's not like an Indian guy who's like dinging his wedding, or some like a family wedding or something like that. Yeah, I've seen that. So that's like a wee snapshot of it. But to see like proper, authentic kind of camcorder footage will be really cool.
It's brilliant, because it was before that age of everybody having that camera phone in their pocket. And I've seen loads of images like yourself, but it's even the sound, which you'll probably not hear because there'll be the voiceover that we interviewed Jim Orr about his experience. Like, he's walking down the street and all you can hear is the tins getting walked on. It's like almost like walking on snow, but walking on empty tins of lager and all that. No trouble. There's loads of things that people will refer to and say, oh, I was right there, or they might even be able to see themselves. So stay tuned, that'll be on the channel at the weekend. We're talking VAR, and John Wilson's come in on YouTube to say, if VAR becomes the biggest talking point after every game, it's time to switch it off, put it back in the box, take it to the edge of a high cliff and eject. I feel like I'm talking about it after every game, JP, and I don't want to. I find it mundane. I find it laborious to talk about these VAR decisions constantly. But last night was frustrating. I'm watching it on the telly. Obviously, you're there and you're watching it in real time, and then you've got the ability to make your mind up on the decisions. But what I decided to do was just go through the 4 games domestically that we've had VAR in. One of which, I don't know, was there any talking points in the Livingston game of note?
The handball for the penalty. We got a penalty, didn't we?
So that went in our favour.
I think so, yeah. Aye, it was the one where it was like a cross, and the guy's hand went up like that and hit his hand, and we got. So
we never complained. I've not got that on my list, but we never complained about that. The first one, right? Cast your mind back to Tynecastle.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I watched that in the pub. Yeah.
Ralston, the goal that was chopped off. Great.
Oh yeah,
diving header.
Yeah. And they said it was a foul from Giakoumakis.
Aye, so the big fella gets penalised for that, but Ralston's brilliant goal. So we've lost 2 excellent goals through VAR. What was your take on that? Were we hard done by?
When they showed it, I went, oh look, they've obviously watched it back, and because Giakoumakis is slightly tugged on a shirt, that doesn't affect the guy. It's not as if it. I think it's just that's him giving the referee a reason to disallow the goal, I think, and it's so petty, it's so small, but it is a slight tug. Whether it's that or it's the foul after, the foul after is a nonsense because the guy just falls over. There's not a foul there, I don't think anyway. But it's not something that I would start going completely nuts about. Because of the tug. If there was no tug in the shirt, they would probably have no leg to stand on. But yeah, it is what it is.
I've got this theory that Giakoumakis gets a hard time.
Oh, he definitely does.
You agree with that?
Aye.
Because I've seen it again. I just think that every single time he goes anywhere, he's either penalised or he certainly doesn't get the rub of the green. And we'll see that once we get to the Dundee United game. Forest penalty, I mean, everybody knows that the ball...
An absolute mystery.
Oh, incredible!
Given what we've seen since then in Madrid, the two penalties in Madrid, I've still not seen the Jens one back. I've seen the Matt O'Reilly one a few times when he's kind of turning away.
Yeah.
If that from Matt O'Reilly is a penalty, how on earth is the James Forrest one not a penalty? I mean, I don't. In the current rules, how is it not a penalty? And how? Yeah, I don't know.
We'll get on to the Burnaby one as well, but they've got to realise, JP, that an unnatural position would actually be for your arms not to be away from your body when you're in full flight.
Yeah, I know.
That is your natural position when you're in full flight.
It's because the rule was being basically set that it's a handball if it hits your hand in the box, it's a penalty. That's what it seems to be. But then how could you then rule out one and rule in another? I don't. You've got to be consistent. I don't think it's fair. I don't think that the penalties that have been given to us, it just doesn't seem right that is what a penalty is now. But with VAR thrown into the mix as well, and obviously we came away from Tynecastle with the 3 points, thankfully, so that didn't affect us. And then the Dundee United game last weekend, it totally affects the mood in the crowd.
Oh yeah.
Everyone was on edge.
That first half, it completely knocked the stuff in.
Yeah.
Out the game.
Yeah.
Out the team. Out the
actual
fans.
It gave Dundee United oxygen in the game, that penalty. And you see the still of Burnaby going up with his hand behind his back, looking away. So the ball hits his hand, but then there's a Dundee United defender who jumps up and his arm's in the exact same position. It's like a mirror of the because that's what you do. He's not done that deliberately. So how? It's just the movement as you go up for a header, isn't it? You don't go up for a header in a different way, and it obviously affected Burnaby as well because he got hooked at half time, and that's you changing your not whole team, but it's changing a component of your team and forcing you to make a substitution that you wouldn't necessarily have made otherwise, because on a yellow card for that as well.
I know.
Like, that's so harsh.
And it's not being paranoid, JP, but you worry that any indiscretion and he's off. You start worrying that that's the case. And Ange obviously shared that frustration. It obviously went to Burnaby's head. There's been for a few years that position that players take up. Ralston does it all the time when he's running towards somebody and he puts his hands behind your back. You can't do that when you're jumping up for a ball.
No.
You can't do that when you're going to ground. And it just seems very, very harsh. So Burnaby's handball. And then Giakoumakis. Sybil's challenge on Giakoumakis. And for me, it's
the
high.
high foot, yeah.
It's high. It's potentially.
Did he get booked for that?
No.
There was no foul given, was there?
No foul given.
Yeah, there's a still image of that as well. I know not everybody likes still images, and I'm not often a fan of them, but that one, you see how high his boot goes. It doesn't, it's not an optical illusion. You're seeing how high his boot goes in a still image. So therefore, if you're putting your boot that high, that's endangering the opponent. No foul given. It. Again, people will watch this maybe from another persuasion, and they'll be like, "Oh, listen to these guys moaning about VAR." I mean, but until it starts happening to your team, which it invariably will, there'll be decisions that happen. I'm not privy to everything that's happened in every single game outside the Celtic because I've simply not had time to watch. Since VAR came in, I've not had time to watch the highlights of every single game or been aware of things that have happened in every single game. But it's not just going to be us, it's going to suffer from this.
No.
It's going to be everybody. And I was so wary about this coming in, and I remember being at games and going, God, you're going to have VAR soon, it's going to be... I mean, even like last night, Motherwell don't have a screen. So you're like, is this happening? What's happening is... you're looking for him the ref standing, giving it, hold on and all that, and you're not even getting that. So everyone's looking at each other going, is this going to VAR? And it's just...
But that's what Ange was speaking about, wasn't it? The fact that, he's thinking about it from the viewer or the fan's perspective. And he's saying it's actually affecting that experience, and it is. And I think the goal, we mentioned the goal, and I spoke last night and I mentioned the fact that, you've had Ralston's excellent finish at Tynecastle. You've got Jota's brilliant finish, brilliant team goal last night.
Oh, Kyogo did really well.
Unbelievable, yeah.
That was the one where Kyogo won it back, didn't he? And then beat a man and then put in just a brilliant ball to him.
He had no right to win the ball back.
No.
And then the ball was inch perfect. I thought the run was timed to perfection. And we've been kind of robbed of that. So, the end of season highlights reel, you can't even put that in there because it was a disallowed goal. It's so unfortunate. And I think the body language of Jota said a lot, because he was saying, I had my eye on the line, I think he'll be feeling really aggrieved. And it concerns me if that was the best quality image they were actually relying on, JP, from the other side of the park, because it's not conclusive from there.
You can handle say a goal's disallowed because of VAR, and then you wait that wee moment in time or minute or two or however long it is, and then they go, right, no goal. You're like, okay, must have been offside then. And then you get home and you see the highlights and like, it was onside. How can that possibly be the case? You know, that is properly ruining the game at that point, because you've just disallowed a goal, a perfectly good goal, having had the opportunity to watch it back again, and then still disallowed it. Like,
you're introducing a very expensive bit of equipment that's meant to improve the quality of the decision making, but it's actually making it even worse. Morris on Starfelt again.
Oh my
you'll
God,
have seen that
tackle.
time and time again today.
Yeah.
On Twitter. And
he got a yellow card, didn't he?
He did, but was that enough?
Nah, that's a straight red. That's
a shocker.
Yeah, I mean, you go. Scott Brown does that in a Rangers game. Off.
Yep.
Off. Absolutely, his reputation would go before him, and he'd be off.
And I'm looking at the player it was against, Starfelt, who's only started coming back into the team and kind of reigniting that partnership that he's got with Carter Vickers. And I'm thinking, that's all it's going to take for us to be in disarray until we get reinforcements in at the back. And I feel the same up top as well. Obviously, everybody's got their thoughts about January and what we bring in January, but I think most people are looking forward to bringing in Kobayashi at the back.
I've seen so many tweets from journalists and people that know that side of the game, and I don't know if I've heard Liam from Celtic Down Under, and I don't know if he's spoken in detail about Kobayashi.
Yeah.
But there's been a few tweets going, how have they let this guy go?
And we're getting him for out.
Yeah, saying that it's a pretty big error on their part, which obviously is not good for them, but it's good for us to be getting somebody with that sort of level of potential. And in fact, maybe it was on Celtic Down Under, or if Liam was on here, but somebody said, who would you take out of Ko Itakura and Kobayashi? And Liam said Kobayashi.
Yeah, and he was on with Dan Orlowitz, the journalist who's based in Japan as well, and he agreed.
Oh, did he agree?
So the two of them actually agreed with that. So that's interesting, because that Itakura looked like a proper.
Well, he's in the squad. He's in the national squad, isn't he?
Superb. You've told us about your trip to Real Madrid. I find it funny, right, that one of the greatest players of all time, Alfredo Di Stefano, that's the guy, who obviously played his testimonial against Celtic in the Bernabeu, and Celtic beat them 1-0. Bobby Lennox scores the goal. Never played at a World Cup final, did Di Stefano?
No.
And I was thinking the other players, because we mentioned George Best last week, and then Paddy Lavery on the chat brought up his avatar, and it was George Best wearing the Celtic centenary tilt in a charity game, and that picture used to be behind the bar at Beards, you'll remember. And there are a few others. Jimmy Johnson never played in a World Cup final. He was in a squad, never played a game.
Was that the one where he nicked their own boat and went out to sea?
That was leading up to the finals, and they reckon that was one of the reasons why
he didn't get a game.
Almost like a punishment. But in saying that, Dennis Law was in that boat. Junkie didn't get out the boat, which was a problem. But Dennis Law was part of all that as well. Sandy Jardine as well. And I'm thinking about the omissions and the inclusions, and I find it really utterly bizarre that Di Stefano's never played in a World Cup final, but potentially Jason Cummings will have done after this World Cup.
It's wild, isn't it? It's absolutely wild. I mean, I know you said, how can Jason Cummings be there and Tom Rogic isn't, but Tom Rogic, I don't really know how much football he's played for West Brom, but to not have had a club for that length of time, you're not going to get into a World Cup squad. Regardless of how good you are, I know he's obviously an absolute potential genius on the park. He's not always a genius in the park, but he's got it in him to do something, utterly incredible. But I think when a guy who struggled for fitness at the best of times in his Celtic career, you're not going to expect somebody like that to go to a World Cup and be able to meaningfully give a meaningful contribution to the cause. So I kind of get it. I feel for him because I'm sure he would have loved to have been there, even though it is a totally weird World Cup, and I'm not entirely sure how much interest I have in it. Really, I
was going to ask you that because see, when I was a kid, right? I mean, you'll see there's a bag out there with the Italia 90 mascot on it, Ciao, one of the best mascots. And
I've got a Ferrari Testarossa die-cast metal keyring with the Ciao on the bonnet. Yeah.
Mind the wee balls you got, the footballs.
I had one of them as well. The Italia 90 balls.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah. And you know, you think
was
back.
it Coca-Cola Italia 90? Yeah.
Coca-Cola, because there was some kind of thing with the ring pool where you won prizes, and that was one of the prizes. Around about the time of the Coca-Cola yo-yos.
Had them as well.
All that stuff.
Do you have a gold spinner?
But remind me, how did you get one?
You had to save up.
Was that what it was?
Something like that. It was tokens or something or other. You couldn't just get one anyway. They were quite hard to get, and I remember getting one, and I actually thought I had the Holy Grail.
I bet just
a gold yo-yo. I think I've still got it actually.
And what was the tricks? Walk the dog and all that, round the world and everything. Remember, everybody had done the tricks.
There was a one where you could put it into like a kind of diamond and then put the in the middle. I can't remember what that was called.
Aye. But you know what? Pre-mobile phones, JP, you made your own funny. You know what I mean?
I mean, you had to. I mean, that was halcyon days.
It was. I think back to those halcyon days. I think back to the 1990 World Cup, 86, Mexico, everything about these tournaments. USA 94, loved that. France 98, loved all these tournaments. But and I don't know if it's because I'm getting older and it's a nostalgic thing. And I look back on World Cup tournaments and the mascots and the players and the teams where that kind of like golden haze. I don't know if it is nostalgia that does that or it's just no special anymore.
I just think it's the timing of it and everything else.
And where it is.
The timing of it, where it is, the lack, well, obviously there's no Scotland there. I don't know, I just think of it as something that I'm not overly excited about. Did you see I presume this is real, but there was a Twitter page shared it this morning saying still these like rooms to let, and they're like €207 a night or something, and it looked like a sort of a prisoner of war camp or something like that. It was just like rows and rows of these little. It was like I can't remember what it was called. It was the something village. You know how they created that for like the Commonwealth Games, but and you're just looking at it going, if that's as hot as you believe, you know, that has that got air conditioning? Is that just like a little sweat box that you stay in for the night? There's no appeal for me as a football fan, really, for this World Cup. I mean, I'll no doubt end up watching a couple of games, but I don't think I'll have the same passion or interest as I would do if it was. I mean, even like, is it going to be like full stadiums? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
what is the atmosphere going to be like?
What is the atmosphere going to be like?
I know.
I can't really imagine how people have the money in the current climate to be able to go over in their thousands and support our national team. I just can't. I can't see it. You know.
No.
I mean, I was joking to you about the airport prices in Geneva, but I mean, it's not going to be cheap over there, is it? It's not a cheap country, as far as I know. I've never been, but I'm guessing it's not a cheap country.
No, and you know, there is also that political aspect of whether or not you want to buy into all this.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
But yeah, it's something that doesn't hold the same allure as it did when I was younger. Let me know in the comments field.
I've not got a sticker album, put it that way.
No, I know, but even that, the sticker albums, you used to get the big charts out of the shooting match, and you knew all the fixtures. You were introduced to players, JP. You know, I remember the 1990 World Cup after '86, just really wanting Maradona to be like immense, and. Yeah, I don't think it was his finest tournament, to be fair. 1990, it wasn't a great tournament. In the end, the final was a bit disappointing. But you look back on the strips, the players, the songs, everything. You know, because I know it was for the England team, but World in Motion, I mean, it's a moment. It's a moment in time with New Order. And I just don't get the same vibe, and I don't know if it's the same with others listening in. What's your thoughts on the World Cup? A couple of wee comments coming in. There's Paddy with his avatar, Georgie Best. I wonder who the guy is sitting next to him in the dressing room there.
I can't make him out. I can see the picture, but I don't know who it is.
Aye, I wonder who that is. Do you know, Paddy? Could you let us know? Strange Love, the Dr. VAR isn't going away anytime soon. Yeah, that is the unfortunate part about this. I welcome it. There's nowhere to hide for players and for officials. By the end of this season, it will build a library of inconsistency and bias that will expose the SFA. Well, you know, the point that Strangelove the Doctor, which is one of the best names on YouTube, makes there, it almost does give you the ability to catalogue all these wrongdoings. And then you're either saying to the SFA, you're incompetent, or worse, because obviously Strangelove's brought up the bias, the discussion of bias. Now, we spoke about this the other day, or the other week, and I spoke about some of the language that's used when we're talking about refs, right? And we know, we hear the words all the time: cheating, corruption, and bias. And what I say is, listen, I'm not saying don't say these things, don't use these words or that terminology. What I always try and say is, how can we prove it? That's the problem, right? So can we prove the cheating and the corruption? No, we can't actually prove it. So you may believe that it exists, we can't prove it. But can you prove bias? Well, yeah, because it exists in every single walk of life. So how do you then compete against the bias? And there's a few examples, obviously, that you know we've spoken about, and Celtic fans speak about. How can you referee a game of football involving a team that you support, for example? Now, that exists in Scottish football, JP. There's no doubt about it.
No, it definitely does. But there was a lot of consternation about the Hearts shout for a penalty last night with the header onto
I was
Ben
looking
Davies.
at that. Yep.
I've watched that a few times, and it hits off his face and then hits his hand. That's what I see, and obviously, I would like to be, angry about it, but I think that's what's happening. Then people were saying, well, why didn't it get looked at? And I don't know what the sort of the machinations is of VAR. Like, so when that's happened, has somebody straight away in his ear gone, hit his face and hit his hand, move on, like really quickly, hit his face, hit his hand, and the ref's just gone, right, okay, in seconds. I don't need to question that.
Why is it so cloak and dagger though? Because if they came out and said that, then it does dampen a lot of the theories, if you like. It's like, this is the reason why. Come out and tell us. And if you do that, then...
But it took so long for the Bernabeu one. I mean, it took ages. And then eventually we gave the penalty and gave the yellow card. And I don't know. There's just inconsistencies all over the place. And as Strangelove the Doctor said, that it will build a portfolio. And it's then clear evidence that I'm not getting into this moon howling, there's bias against us, or... It's just incompetence.
But then the thing as well, though, JP, the club don't really communicate how frustrated they are, but they obviously are doing stuff behind the scenes, because at the AGM, not this year, the year previous, Ian Bankier stated that they had concerns, they were deeply concerned. It was brought up again at the AGM this year, so the club are doing stuff behind the scenes. They're unhappy with the decisions, and like you say, we've actually come through the 4 games that we've been looking at, and we've won all 4 games, and it is at that point that you say, this is not good enough. There's another wee thing I was going to say. Dermot Gallagher, he's the guy that comes out now on Sky Sports, right? And Stuart, who works in the studio, showed me something completely unrelated to the conversation we're having, and it was a Ben Thatcher tackle. He was playing for Portsmouth, where it was Pedro Mendes, and he smashes Pedro Mendes. I think he's knocked out, and he gets booked for it, and it's Dermot Gallagher who's the ref, and I'm like, right, so why should we be listening to you, mate? That was one of the most horrific refereeing decisions I have ever seen. Look it up on Twitter, because it was there last week or the week before. I'm going to bring up this point from Daniel Brown. The club's voted for VAR, but too many want it on the cheap. More cameras are required to give it credibility. I don't disagree with that. If that is the only angle we can see the Jota decision, the UEFA minimum is not good enough. I think so. But as Strangelove said, build yourself a case, and then you can go to the authorities. We've been talking about international football with the World Cup, and I'll come back to that when we talk about some of the Celtic players that made it and those who didn't. But obviously there's been an international knockback, because Celtic are not releasing players for Scotland's friendly against Turkey.
Quite right.
And Starfelt's not being released for a game for Sweden. Stevie Clark comes out and does what Stevie Clark does.
Bewildered.
How good were Ange's comments though?
Amazing.
Brilliant.
Oh, so good. Like, he's got them on strings. He's absolutely got them on strings. And we're perfectly entitled. If we were only announcing that game now or something like that, okay, you could maybe form an argument, but that game's been in the diary for a long, long time, so you can't just sort of, we've decided to have a friendly against Turkey. How long has that Turkey game been in the diary?
I know. And how important is it, really? for our players to be involved in that.
The three players that would have gone, Taylor, Turnbull and Ralston, would it have been? Aye, Taylor, Turnbull and Ralston. I would argue that none of them would have started, potentially.
Yeah.
So you'd be taking them for them to be in the squad and maybe get a substitute appearance. Because he's not going to play Taylor over Andy Robertson or Kieran Tierney, I wouldn't have thought. Midfield, I think the Scotland midfield is kind of set in stone, isn't it? And Turnbull isn't a starter in that.
No.
And Ralston's up against, I don't know, who is right back for Scotland? I can't even think who would get in. But he's called up Ramsey, so that's an experience for Calvin Ramsey, and it's an opportunity for him to play at that level. Celtic are going to be, as they are, contracted to play in a tournament already. And
I know.
And Ange wants to take the players that he wants to take. He doesn't. I don't see the issue. I really don't.
We want to look after our Australian fan base. I mean, I know that Scotland don't care about that, but as a club, right, there's quite a few things here. I remember, like, we're obviously working through the old VHS video collection retrospectives, and we'll have more on the channel very, very soon. But it's going to pre-season in the 90s, and we're over in Ireland, and it was a regular thing. We would go to Ireland, we would play some friendlies. The Irish fan base seen Celtic in the flesh, and obviously at that time it was Liam Brady, and we had Big Cascarino had just signed and all this as well. But we've not even been doing that as often as we should. And you look at the Irish fan base and the fact that it's given a wee bit back. You look at, we've got a massive fan base in America. I know that's not as easy, and Australia's not been as easy because in the pre-season we've not had the time due to the qualifiers for the Champions League. So I get it. So this is an opportunity for us now to tap into not the market, the fan base, and give a wee bit back to the fan base. You're seeing a Celtic team, and with all due respect to every single member of the B team, the Australian fan base will be what to watch the first team.
Aye,
as
course.
well.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Ange, when he's been getting badgered constantly in the pressers,
by the way,
VAR,
some of the questions he gets asked in press conferences are. I honestly watch them, and I'm listening to what the folk are saying, and I'm like, how is that your question? You've got this opportunity to speak to the manager of Celtic Football Club, and that's the question you've asked.
I know.
And he just kind of goes, yeah, they're not really, and you just see him kind of like going, why are you asking me these questions?
I know. The one for me, right, is, by the way, I have never met Ange Postecoglou. I've never been in a press conference with him. We do get invited.
You're not hung about outside Usabi Deli in the West End?
Not yet. Although I was at the, what was it called? Crab Shack. I was speaking about it, wasn't I? The Crab Shack in the West End, absolutely brilliant. There's two of them, but there's one in the West End, superb, and apparently he likes to go in there for a wee bit of lunch. So I might be hanging about at some point. But we do, as Axom, get invited into the pressers, but we've got a couple of people in the team who would benefit from doing that as part of their studies, JP. So generally speaking, I'm never anywhere near them. But I'm going to say something. I think if I was faced with Ange, I'd be a wee bit nervous. I think I would be.
I mean, yeah, but it still doesn't stop you from preparing a better question than some of the mundane, pointless questions that they ask him. Like,
especially when it's been asked. That's the one thing. If you're going into a press conference, right, make sure you've got half a dozen questions, because the chances are
someone else will ask the same one.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe what happens. And then it gets to like an actual journalist, and they're like, oh no, I've got to go down to my sixth choice question, which is the worst one. And then they have to say it. So you need to make sure they're all of a decent standard.
Definitely.
Something that's going to make him, I don't know, just get his, get the juices flowing. Get his juices flowing, get his interest. Because like when you do get that, you normally get a really good answer. I mean, Declan's got some good stuff from him.
Big Tony. And
Tony as well. Yeah. They know what to mine for. Whereas you just get these kind of really basic questions that don't. He answers, and you're none the wiser to anything. He's just given a polite stock answer that hasn't really given you any information. It's answered the question probably just to placate the person that's asked it, but it doesn't really give you anything to go on.
Nothing really tangible. And the thing too as well, right, I love interviews. I watch them all the time. People have got their own kind of like choice videos on YouTube and all that. I tend to watch interviews, long form interviews, music related, film related, football, whatever it might be. And you're looking at the way that some of these questions are actually shaped as well. JP, and you think to yourself, well, just, if you're in an interview, you've got to have a few rules, right? And right now, if I'm a journalist, which I'm not, and I respect those that are, I'd be saying, I'm not going to ask him about VAR. I'm not going to ask him about motivating your team now that there's no Champions League football, because that gets asked every single week. And I'm not going to ask him about injuries either. It's the 3 questions that are stock questions. And I know that there'll be a bit of pressure on some of the journalists from the editors to say, we need to know this for the piece. But if somebody's already asked it, you can use the quotes anyway. You don't have to attribute them to anybody.
Well, just on the subject of Ange Postecoglou, my mate Mikey went to a thing at Celtic Park the other night. It was like an audience with Ange, so it was like in the number 7 restaurant or something like that, and it was just like, I don't know, 100 say people, season ticket holders, whatever, and he got the opportunity to go to that, and he heard Ange talking about his knowledge of Celtic, and he said that obviously he followed Liverpool as a boy, because it was Liverpool and Man United were the 2 teams that were predominantly shown in Australia. But when he found it, because he loved Kenny Dalglish so much, when he found out where Kenny Dalglish had come from, he then took an interest in Celtic. And they said that thing, he was sitting on the plane as he was leaving Japan, and he was just absolutely certain, because he knew about what Celtic was all about, Irish immigrants, all the rest of it. He knew when he was on the plane, he was like, I know I'm going somewhere where I'm going to be embraced. I'm going to be accepted.
Amazing.
So he knew at that point, like without even having, met anybody, or, obviously it had all been done by Zoom, right? Because at that point it was COVID and everything else, so he hadn't actually come to the ground and shook hands with anybody or anything like that. It had all been online. So to have that knowledge that you were, and then when you see what it's like now, so knowing that and then seeing him at the Bernabeu, last week waving up to the fans and having the full Celtic end singing Ange Postecoglou, ole, and it was just, I mean, imagine how proud he must have been. And also, by the way, I must mention this, I don't know if I told you, at the end of the game, we were obviously kept in, we weren't allowed to leave, so the Bernabeu emptied, and Matt O'Reilly walked out, and I'm pretty sure he didn't have his boots on, so he was just in his full Celtic kit, just walking out in the middle of the ground, and then he was on the phone, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. He's just on the phone, walking about in the middle of the pitch in the Bernabeu, and then I looked over, and his mum and dad came down from the side, and he went and met them. Obviously, was like, right, go to this bit. Went and met them, had a 5-minute chat with them, hugged them and all that, and then he walked back into the middle of the park, and he just sat down, and he just sat looking around at the Bernabeu, in an empty Bernabeu, and we were all singing and everything, and you're just putting my mind into his mind and going, a year ago he was playing for MK Dons.
Yes, 3rd tier in English football.
How mental is that that is what and that's why all these people that are saying that he's going to be out the door in January and everything else, I just don't see it. I don't see him jumping ship this soon. And I know you said it last night that you don't think it's the time. Maybe it's the time for Juranovic given his age. Matt O'Reilly's 21, he's 22 in 10 days or something like that. I looked it up. I don't know Matt O'Reilly that intimately. But
some Celtic fans do.
I know, we were talking about it last night in the pub after the game. But I just don't think I just don't see him going this soon. I think surely to goodness you'd want another crack at the Champions League.
What I like
because when he might never play in the Champions League again.
This is the thing.
I'm not saying that he won't. I mean, there's a chance that he will.
Well,
however,
who's been interested? Leicester, Newcastle, Crystal Palace. So, but what I like about the situation is he's the type of player who obviously, right, even if it's not the obvious decision, he makes his own decision, which even meant he was out of football for a period of time, and he had to keep himself fit after he leaves Fulham. So he didn't leave for a club. There was nothing lined up. There was no plan B. He left because he needed to leave. So whatever decision he makes, it'll not be based on a knee-jerk. It won't be solely based on money, because he's obviously forward-thinking enough.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's the time is right. By the way, his dad's got great hair as well. Eh?
His dad looked, even from a distance, looked like a cool character. I think he's obviously got his music taste from his dad, judging by what his dad looks like, because he's into like kind of, I don't know, like rock and stuff like that. So he's just, I really got a lot of time for him, and I think he's done so well without Callum McGregor alongside him. I think I still think last night I thought the midfield played reasonably well. Kevin Graham described it as utter dross. I don't agree with that at all, Kevin. You know, everybody says we always agree on these podcasts. I definitely don't agree that we were utter dross last night. I thought we played well. We were up against a determined Motherwell team who didn't offer a lot going forward. And obviously they were looking to take that chance late on in the game because we were only 1-0 up. We should have been 2-0 up because of the Jota goal, but we weren't. We were denied that. So we would have been 2 and cruising, and maybe we'd have gone on to score a third and fourth, but it got a wee bit nervy, misplaced passes, things like that. But then delighted for Daizan Maeda to get the winner, because he's come under a lot of. I mean, he gets a lot of stick at the ground. You hear it from people. They just don't think he's that great, and then you're like, well, he's in the Japan World Cup squad, and Kyogo isn't, and Hatate isn't. There's a reason he's there, you know. And I think he's a really valuable player, and he's obviously fluffed his lines a few times. Missing that shot against Madrid was. I still think it came out of him really fast. It wasn't a neat pass. It was almost like a shot that you had to control. And there's been obviously that attempt at a cross. I think in that same game, was it that game or was it a Shakhtar game? I can't remember, but he just absolutely melted it and it went high and wide. But I mean, players make mistakes. Larsson's made mistakes. Chris Sutton made mistakes. It's everything's scrutinised so much.
Remember the fantasy football sketch, and it was about Pele. He was worse than Jason Lee. You know, and it was like they never show you the bad bits. Everybody makes mistakes on the football field.
Everything's scrutinised to like an nth degree now, and that's what people form their opinions on, and people form their opinions on people's opinions on Twitter and things like that. Someone will put together a tweet that they think is the right thing and they're right, and nobody else can disagree with them, and it's, you know, people will go, oh, actually I think that too, and there's like retweet, and you're like, and then suddenly it becomes fact, and you're like, wait a minute, what? Like saying things like we can recover, we can survive the loss of Juranovic in January because he's obviously been linked with a move. I like Anthony Ralston. I think he's really great. I think he's done amazing to get up to speed in terms of the way we play, and the fact that he's actually now considered an important part of the squad. I don't think that just means that we can go, see you later, Josip, thanks for the memories. I would rather Juranovic stayed until the end of the season to not give us the headache of having to get a player in January.
Exactly. Are we going to be in a position where at some point between now and the end of the season, JP, that Stephen Welsh is playing at right back? Because all it takes is a suspension or an injury to Tony Ralston, and that's where we are. Even on the left-hand side, you know, we're going to be in a position if any of the two first choices in Bernabe and Taylor gets injured or suspended, that you really are down to the bare bones, because we've loaned out another 2 left backs to Aberdeen and St Johnstone. So you can't just say, oh, we'll be fine and we can withstand that. You actually can't. The only reason we should sell Juranovic is if we've got somebody lined up.
Yeah, I don't really want any of our key players leaving in January. I'd be happy for anybody to go that is on the fringes or needs game time and all the rest of it. And there is a few of them, of course there is. It's a shame for James McCarthy that he's picked up that hamstring injury, because that maybe would hinder him from getting a move potentially, or getting a loan period, because obviously he's on a long contract, so a 6-month loan in January might have suited him, but that he might struggle to get that now. But you see Barkas is doing really well. I don't know how many times I said that on this podcast, that Barkas wasn't a bad keeper, and everybody said hologram hands, cabbage hands, and all this sort of stuff, and it's just like, I just don't think it was one of those classic cases of a move not working out for somebody. You don't pay $5 million for a keeper and he suddenly becomes the worst keeper in the world.
Greek international, Champions League experience.
Exactly.
And the good thing about it, when we loan players out, I want them to absolutely flourish, because then I wouldn't say, oh, that means he can come back, because I would never have him back. But that means that he can move on, and we actually get I'm not going to say a decent fee, because you're trying to recoup something at that stage.
You might get a decent fee for him based on his performance. I mean, you've got to like base it on the performances in the loan spell, but there'll probably have been something already negotiated. Surely you would have thought there'll be a fee input into the deal that it's whether it was good or bad, that's what they're paying.
And you want Mikey Johnson playing well.
Yeah.
Some of the others.
Again, we all said that he just needed games.
I know.
How many times did we just say, he just needs a change of environment and a bit of confidence in playing somewhere else. And
definitely.
And there you go. He's got it. There is obviously players that have come to Celtic, and you do know that there isn't a future for them at a certain level in the game. We've seen that. I would have thought Bio would have been one of those people, but I'm wrong on that. He's down.
He's proven us wrong.
Yeah.
He's doing a Pookie. Doing a team with Pookie. A couple of the points you made there. O'Reilly, just very quickly, JP, when McGregor comes back, where do you play O'Reilly?
Back in his position, I would say. I think he'll be a better player for this period of time playing in a different position, because it will make his all-round game better, I would have thought. Because he's taken on different responsibility in McGregor's absence, and I think McGregor has to go back into his role. I know people are saying maybe put McGregor further forward and keep O'Reilly where he is, but McGregor in that pivot role where he's dictating the play and dictating the tempo, we've missed that so much. We missed it against Real Madrid, home and away, when he was obviously injured. And God, we missed it against Shakhtar. I maintain McGregor plays that Shakhtar home game, potentially we win that game.
Different outcome.
I do think that.
You were speaking about the Bernabeu, JP. Which other stadiums are on the bucket list to watch on an away day for Celtic?
Dortmund, 100% Dortmund. And well, I have done Man United, but it wasn't a competitive game. It was the Giggs' testimonial. But definitely Dortmund, and I would have loved to have gone to the Rome to Lazio. I was away when that happened, and I'm gutted I didn't get to that, because that would have been. I mean, I think that's going to be up there in one of the ultimate trips away in the future, because you never know when these things are going to happen. You never know when they're going to come round. That's why people do push the boat out.
Yeah.
For like the likes of last week, not since 1980.
I know.
So when's the next time? And we're not being consistently in the Champions League either. So we've not had that.
So I'd need to live till I'm 84.
Aye, well, exactly. That's
based on
that
those
is why you push the boat out for these things and make sacrifices and live on I don't know, beans and sausages on toast for a while. But
listen, beans on toast is underrated.
Aye.
Sprinkle a wee bit of cheese on
and also is this the fact that the games are going to end as of Saturday. The next game on Saturday, we're not going to see Celtic in the flesh until. Well, I'm not going to go. I don't think I'll be at Pittodrie on the 17th of December, because I'm working a gig that night in Edinburgh. Richard Hawley.
I was introducing young Stuart to the Long Pigs, and I explained how Hawley had played
and
there.
he was in Pulp as well. So yeah, Saturday. Really looking forward to Saturday. Last Celtic game for a while, and at Celtic Park, and we just want to make sure we get the 3 points in round dot. I mean, so many people were saying that Rangers were going to be ahead at the break. Some of the goons on Twitter that follow that club saying adamant that they were going to be ahead, and it's just like, well,
based on what?
I know.
One thing you mentioned there, we'll finish off with this about Ange and his recollections of coming over, and he knew that he was going to be accepted, but people use the term quite a lot that he gets it, but he actually does, right? It's a bit of cliche, but he does. In that, obviously, you see the immigration, the Greek immigrants to his part of Australia, and the community club that was formed, South Melbourne Hellas, was for that very reason. There was other teams in the league who were made up of Italian immigrants, and the Italian community went to watch the Italian team. They're called Juventus. And then, obviously, the team that Ange Postecoglou played for was the Greek equivalent of that. So he does get it. He gets why Celtic were formed, and he gets the traditions and the heritage of the club as well, which, by the way, are covered in some style by the Wakes on our new single. I heard the most up-to-date mix yesterday. We're almost there, JP. You've heard it. It's going to be, I hope, a big success for our charity weekender. We've got a single. We've been working on it for a long, long time. And, we like a bit of music. Therefore, we are dipping our toes into the music industry. One last comment coming up. Liquidated Beggars FC. I'm not sure where you get your name from. Opposite the Brazen Head used to be the old railway club. So that's the
Gorbal Sound.
That's the building.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you look at it from the outside, It's like a TARDIS. Once you get in there,
Is that the Go Radio Studios is there as well?
that's it.
Is it next to that?
It's in the building
Part of
now.
that? Yeah, I have seen that. Yeah.
And when we were in there interviewing Paul Quinn and doing another few podcasts, we bumped into Jim Kerr in the car park, just bouncing about.
Did they start regaling you with tales of kicking a sheep's bladder around the streets of Tory Glen?
He didn't actually. He spoke about. Well, I probably asked him. He spoke about that time he was in the recording studio with Jimmy Johnson.
All right, okay.
Dirty Old Town.
Yeah.
But,
by the way, that impression and patter is copyright of a friend of mine, Chris Kaczynski, who's in Sydney, Australia now, and he used to do that impression. I've borrowed it from him.
But yourself and Paul Sheridan are very good at the impressions, I'll give you that. And we'll wait for a wee while before you give us the Kevin Graham one again, JP. But thanks everybody for getting involved. That was 700 strong live on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, get subscribing to the channel. And also, if you want to support us, we've got some merchandise on our website, and the link for that is underneath, as is the link to Etiv Watches, who have got a really cool Celtic minded watch.
Seen it.
You get 15% off using the code, get this, Paul John Dykes.
You'll get slagged for that.
Super.
You definitely will.
Absolutely. Though all that's left for me to say is thank you once again, JP Mason, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.